Hi, thanks for taking a look at the next episode here. I am studying this week a few passages that are all talking about an incident when Jesus and his disciples were going through some grain fields on a Sabbath, and the disciples were picking heads of grain and snacking on them, and the Pharisees gave them a hard time about working on the Sabbath. So there were a few things that I kind of picked up from this passage. So Jesus makes a couple of Old Testament references that I wanted to talk about. And then, of course, the Pharisees here. I am kind of making an assumption in the text that I wrote out for this study, but the Pharisees had already committed themselves to catching Jesus doing something. And so when I was reading about the scene of this, and I wondered, how did the Pharisees even see Jesus and the disciples in the middle of a field wandering around on a Sabbath? Well, I feel like it was because the Pharisees were following him everywhere, just trying to catch him at all times. So one thing to note is that Jesus wasn't, it doesn't say that Jesus was picking the grain. It was just the disciples. But Jesus did defend them against the Pharisees. So he references a passage from 1 Samuel where David and some of his men ate some ceremonial showbread that was only meant for priests. But at the time, he was running for his life from Saul, and he had already been anointed to be the next king of Israel. So his life was more important to preserve his life than it was to observe ceremony and ritual. And as Jesus is referencing that passage about David, he also mentions a passage from Hosea, which he has referenced before. This is the second time he's brought it up, that he desires compassion, or that God desires compassion and not a sacrifice. In some translations, it's mercy and not a sacrifice. And so the point is, what God really wants is for you to understand what the law is about, what this is for, and to observe the purpose of it and the spirit of it, as opposed to some mundane ritual, and certainly not to the exclusion of the spirit itself. So, if his will is for you to live, then to make yourself totally sick or die, and they won't die of starvation in one day, but that's not the point. So anyway, take a look at the rest of the comments, and I hope this one's helpful to you. All right.